Yasomati Nandana Brajavadhanagara Gokura Ranjana Ahana Yasomati Nandana Brajavadhanagara Gokura Ranjana Ahana Gokura Gopi Paranandanam Adhanam Manohara Gopi Paranandanam Adhanam Manohara Kaliya Dhammana Vidhana Kaliya Dhammana Vidhana Hamala Harinam Mamiya Vilasaha Hamala Harinam Mamiya Vilasaha Vipina Purandara Navinagara Vada Vamsi Vadhana Ahasahai Navinagara Hey Vajadanam Phalana Sudhakulana Sana Bhajanana Bhavana Sudhakulana Sana Bandha Gurana Kohala Bandha Gurana Kohala Govinda Madhava Namanita Kaskara Govinda Madhava Namanita Kaskara Sundarananda Gopala Sundarananda Gopala Jamuna Taptachara Gopi Vasanohara Gopi Vasanohara Jamuna Taptachara Gopi Vasanohara Rasa Rasika Kripa Mohoya Rasa Rasika Kripa Mohoya Hey Sri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nattavadari Yasomati Nandana Vrajabharanagara Gokula Ranjana Ha 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 Yasomati Vrajabharanagara Gokula Hey Amala Harinam Amiyavi Vasaham Govinda Madhava Dhavanita Taskara Jamuna Tatta Jara Gopi Vasanohara Hey Hey Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nattavara Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna. Hey, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Govinda Madhava Dhavanita Taskara Yamuna Tatta Chara Gopi Vasanohara Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Nattavara Haribo, 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 Haribo. Hey, Thai Gor Haribo, 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 Gor Haribo. Jaya Ghoranithai, 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 Jai Ghoranithai, Jaya Ghoranithai, 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 Jai Ghoranithai. Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Hey, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Hare Krishna Mahamantra ki jai. Is the first canto, chapter 2, verse number 8. Is that correct? 1, 2, 8. We're doing a series, we're following in verse by verse.
These sections, this week we had a break. How many verses? I actually
you picked that verse, okay. Prabhupada like to speak on this one. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 1, Chapter 2, Divinity and Divine Service. Text number 8. Dharma swanustita pumsam Vishvaksena katasuya Nopadayad ratim Srama eva hi kevalam Dharma swanustita pumsam Vishvaksena katasuya Nopadayad ratim Srama eva hi kevalam. Chant.
Dhamma sanushtita pumsa Vishvaksena kathasya Shama eva hi kevalam
Dharma sanushtita pumsam Vishvaksena kathasya Padayed yatiratim Shama eva hi kevalam Dharma sanushtita pumsam Vishvaksena kathasya Padayed yatiratim Shama eva hi kevalam
Anyone else? Dharma. Occupation. Swanustita. Executed in terms of one's own position. Pumsam. Of humankind. Vikshvaksena. The personality of Godhead. Plenary portion. Katasu. In the message of Yah. What is not upadayat, does produce yadi, if ritim, attraction, shrama, useless labor, eva, only, he, certainly, kevalam, entirely. So, this section of the Bhagavatam is pretty foundational in establishing the whole principles of Bhakti Yoga. It's from verse 126 all the way through up until 1-22 and beyond. But this whole second chapter here is very foundation, setting up all of the philosophical basis for all of the teachings of Krishna consciousness. Translation. The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. I'll read it again. The occupational activities a man performs, according to his own position, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead. This purport is a little lengthy. Purport. There are different occupational activities in terms of man's different conceptions of life. The gross materialist who cannot see anything beyond the gross material body, there is nothing beyond the senses. Therefore, his occupational activities are limited to concentrated and extended selfishness. Concentrated selfishness centers around the personal body, which is generally seen amongst the lower animals. Extended selfishness is manifested in human society and centers around the family, society, community, nation, and world with a view to gross bodily comfort. Above these gross materialists are the mental speculators who hover aloof in the mental spheres, and their occupational duties involve making poetry, philosophy, or propagating some ism with the same aim of selfishness limited to the body and the mind. But above the body and mind is the dormant spirit soul, whose absence from the body makes the whole range of bodily and mental selfishness completely null and void. But less intelligent people have no information of the needs of the spirit soul. Because foolish people have no information of the soul and how it is beyond the purview of the body and mind, they are not satisfied in the performance of their occupational duties. The question of the satisfaction of the self is raised herein. The self is beyond the gross body and subtle mind. He is the potent active principle of the body and mind. Without knowing the need of the dormant soul, one cannot be happy simply with emolument of the body and the mind. The body and the mind are but superfluous outer coverings of the spirit soul. The spirit soul's needs must be fulfilled. Simply by cleansing the cage of the bird, one does not satisfy the bird. One must actually know the needs of the bird himself. The need of the spirit soul is that he wants to get out of the limited sphere of material bondage and fulfill his desire for complete freedom. He wants to get out of the covered walls of the greater universe. He wants to see the free light and the spirit. That complete freedom is achieved when he meets the complete spirit, the personality of Godhead. There is a dormant affection for God within everyone. Spiritual existence is manifested through the gross body and mind in the form of perverted affection for the gross and subtle matter. Therefore, we have to engage ourselves in occupational engagements that will invoke our divine consciousness. This is possible only by hearing and chanting the divine activities of the Supreme Lord, and by occupational activity which does not help one to achieve attachment for hearing the transcendental message of the Lord. It is said it's simply a waste of time. This is because other occupational duties, whatever ism they may belong to, cannot give liberation to the soul. Even the activities of the salvationists are considered to be useless because of their failure to pick up the fountainhead of all liberties. The gross materialist can practically see that his material gain is limited only to time and space, either in this world or in the other. Even if one goes up to Swargaloka, that's the heavenly planets, he will find no permanent abode for his hankering soul. The hankering soul must be satisfied by the perfect scientific process of perfect devotional service. Om Agyan Timirandasya Giranjana Salakaya Chaksuun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shmakti Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pucharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Pastyatya Satarine Panchakalpa Tarubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vapacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namaho Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's my first experience in any Krishna house, so it's good. I came to the inception of all Krishna houses. Came to. Yes. So this verse kind of illustrates the foundation by which one finds happiness or complete frustration. The living entity, sometimes people think, well, yeah, I'm not this body, I know that, but I'm what I think, I'm this mind, I am my mind. So, and therefore they still remain somewhat bewildered by the activities they perform, because the mind is also a part of the material energy. It's a more subtle aspect of the material energy. It's based on directing the activities of the living entity. But it's a conditioned principle that comes by way of association with matter. So people think, well, I can understand my body is separate. I am what I think. I am what I believe. But that's a more subtle form of ignorance, but it's also ignorance. Because beyond these two conceptions of existence, and Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhumirapanalo Bayu Kamanam Buddhi Evicha Ahankar Iti Ame Bina Prakriti Astada. The two elements of material existence are combined into 8 elements, 5 gross and 3 subtle. The gross we can understand, see, and interact with. The subtle becomes more harder to understand, but it's also the element of mind, intelligence, and ego, which is subtle. So we also, as beings, we also have another identity, and Krishna goes on to explain in the same series of verses. There's another element which is not material, which is the basis of all activities in the material world, and that is that element is part and parcel of me, the spirit being. So that's who we are. We have a material body, but we are not the material body. It's just like we have a car. Sometimes people get so absorbed in their car that when they have an accident or something goes wrong with the car, they say, "Oh, you hit me, my car." They get so attached to the external possessions that they have that they actually give their identity and relationship to them. But that's another gross form of ignorance. Beyond this, so what is the relationship between the body, the mind, the intelligence, which is another feature of the mind, but a more subtle aspect of the mind, and the actual person, the soul? We can use an analogy. It's a nice analogy. The analogy is that there is the sky. Sky is broad. It's got, sky, and sometimes we say the sky is unlimited. You can't really measure the sky, nor can anyone even go to the extended roots of the sky. The sky is so broad. But in the sky there is birds, airplanes, clouds, and sometimes other elements in the sky. But these things don't touch the sky, although they appear to be within the sky. Similarly, our thoughts in the mind is actually like the different elements that appear in the sky, and the sky is more like the soul. The soul doesn't touch anything material, yet it is in contact, apparently, with something material. Just like if you try to mix water and oil, because these two things are completely opposite in nature, you can do it, but naturally, due to the influence of time, they'll automatically go back to their separation. So in the same way, the thoughts that we have within the mind are simply impressions upon the soul, but they don't touch the soul. They don't touch the soul. The soul remains completely free, and Prabhupada uses the word dormant. The soul is somewhat a witness of everything that's going on in the material sense, but at the same time, not involved with the activities. It's more like sometimes you go to sleep at night, and when you go to sleep, you dream. So sometimes in your dream, you see yourself in the dream. Right? So that image of yourself is the conception you have of your material body. And you're watching yourself in the dream, and then it appears to be two of you, the watcher and the person in the dream. So which one is the real one? The one that's actually observing is actually the soul. And what's in the dream is just a subtle manifestation of the mind's activities according to our conception of ourselves. And so in the same way, everything that happens in this material world that goes around is superfluous to us, the living entities. We're not really doing anything. Although we perform activities, but the body, the mind, the senses, and even the intelligence are active in doing things, and these are all features of the material energy, but the soul remains aloof from all of these activities. And therefore, the soul is more or less inactive in the material world. But at the same time, the soul has activity itself. So only when the soul engages in something according to its nature does the soul start to activate its intelligence, mind, and senses, because the mind, the body, and the senses that we have in the material sense are simply coverings over our spiritual mind, spiritual body, spiritual senses, spiritual intelligence. They're not real, they're more like coverings, and they dissipate according to the power of one's practice of devotional service. In other words, devotional service removes or eliminates these conceptions of material consciousness and awareness and activities through the power of connecting with Krishna in devotional service. So this is just to give you a little understanding that ultimately that the soul appears to be active, but it's not active. It's the body and the mind, the senses, the intelligence that's doing everything. You've seen sometimes that little image they make in the Bhagavad Gita. There's the chariot, and the chariot is the body. And on the chariot, there are two people. One is driving, and one is the passenger. And the driver's got the reins, and there are four horses or five? 5 horses. 5 horses are the 5 senses. The reins are the mind. The driver is the intelligence, and the passenger is the soul. The passenger is just being dragged by, or the soul is being dragged by the activities of the mind and the senses in contact with the material energy. So ultimately we do nothing material, but it appears that we do, and that's the illusion. So when we so therefore life actually starts when we actually perform activities in relationship to the soul. Then life actually begins. Before then, it's just a shadow of existence that's moving around. And that's the conditioned mind, the soul, the senses, the intelligence, and the body is all moving. Yeah. So it's just like Prabhupada makes the analogy here. You have a nice bird inside of a cage, and the cage is really beautiful. The owner of the cage is thinking, a bird is always thinking, oh, boy, I'm going to really take care of that bird by polishing the cage. So you get some polish out, decorate the cage, put some leaves or flowers around the cage, give the cage a name maybe. And then everyone thinks, oh, wow, I'm taking care of it. But the bird is inside and it's getting no attention at all. That's material life. Material life, everyone is giving attention to the superfluous external form of their existence, which is simply a creation of the activities we perform in this. So everyone's mind, senses, intelligence, and activities are formulated according to their activities in this world. And it's all false. It's false in the sense that it doesn't bring any benefit for the living entity. The living entity remains aloof from all of this and is waiting for an opportunity to do something. And then when devotional service begins, we actually start to live. When we connect with activities that are above the mind, the senses, and the intelligence, we actually begin. So what is our feature? What is the importance of the material mind, the senses, and the intelligence? It can bring us closer to ourselves by directing ourselves towards Krishna or devotional service. Otherwise, there's a very strong statement here. It says, Shrama eva hi kevalam. That means everything in the material world is useless. Very well. Now, if you tell a materialist that, he'll think, you're crazy. So Prabhupada, I remember when I was first joined the Hare Krishna movement, this was even before I even joined. This was in 1970. I was at an anti-war rally in Washington, D.C. And then this is the first time I saw the devotees. And I was thinking, who are these persons with these bed sheets on? And they were walking around. We came there to protest the Vietnam War. And they were, I don't know what they were doing. I just saw them. And then I got approached by this very, very nice young lady and said, handed me 2 sticks of incense and a little pamphlet and said, can you give a donation? So I took out 50 cents. She said, no, $2. My introduction to Hare Krishna. But that was okay. I gave the $2. I thought it was kind of unusual. She would ask for more, but anyway, it didn't bother me. So I got the pamphlet, and there was 2 articles within the one pamphlet. One said, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the other one was a response to people's criticism of our movement, and that was called Who is Crazy? We say you are crazy, and you say we are crazy. So let's discuss. So Prabhupada went into a discussion explaining that if you don't know who you are, then that's a sign of insanity. And the first principle of life is you have to know who you are. So if you think you're something other than who you are, just like in the world they have these what's called insane asylums. Well, people are considered by material standards to be unfit to live within society because of their behavior. So they're not criminals, but they're just not able to function. And sometimes they cause harm to themselves and others. So sometimes some of their caretakers, they put them in a place where they can get better care. And I don't know, they call them insane asylums, but that's a pretty strong word. But actually it defines And so if you go in there, you understand everyone here is not right. So when a devotee sees in the material world and looks around and says, everyone here, this is an insane asylum. They all think there's something there and they're not. And they're acting in the same way. So it's in the same way. The same principle is there. So this is material life. And because the living entity wants to enjoy, the nature of life is enjoyment. When people would ask Prabhupada, what is the goal of life? The goal of life is to be happy. That would be the answer. And that's a complete and perfect answer. The goal of life is to be happy. Then the question is, what do you do to be happy? And what is the nature of what is real happiness? So happiness is something that doesn't come from the outside. It comes from the inside, or it is there within. So we say, in the scriptures say, the soul is by nature eternal, full of knowledge, and unlimitedly joyful. But it's covered by the material body. So the process of devotional service is meant to bring out that natural happiness through the activities of devotional service, especially hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, which is the foundation for all happiness. But for the non-devotees, they will work really hard and they'll spend so much time, on performing so many activities, but they can't find any happiness because they're never satisfied. If you might say, well, there might be somebody out there who's happy. But it's not, what goes on is happiness as defined by Krishna and is defined by the scriptures is simply a relief from suffering. If you're sick, that's suffering. So if you get well, then that's a form of happiness. But what is it? You're counteracting sickness. And so you're coming back to something that is apparently normal. If you're hungry, that can be a difficult situation. Fulfilling that desire for hunger by eating makes one satisfied and happy. So what is it? Counteraction. Lusty desires are there. People have lusty desires. They try to fulfill their lusty desires. They get some temporary fulfillment. They think I'm happy. But then again, because it's material, again, it returns again. So this is material life. It's only counteracting the misery of material life. That's why Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Dukkalayam vasasritam. Everything in this material world ends in ultimately misery. In the material world, there's three results to all activities. One, you want to be happy, you go for it, and you get what you want, but it doesn't give you the happiness you want. Two, you want to be happy, you try for something, you don't achieve it, you're unhappy. And the third one is you try for something, you achieve it, you get some happiness for some time, and then it goes. Well, that's the only three results to all material activities. You don't get it, you're not happy. You get it, it doesn't give you the happiness. You get it, some happiness, and then time takes it away. But devotional service is any activities that one performs in devotional service sets the foundation and builds on that quality more and more. So any activity one performs in devotional service stays with the devotee and just builds more and more until one reaches higher and higher levels of realization. And ultimately, susukam kartavavyayam, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that this process is by nature very joyful. Because it connects one with the ultimate principle, Krishna. And Krishna is the epitome or the principle of all success in life, or happiness, we might say, or the goal of life. And one who takes to devotional service, even if a person, there's a nice verse, it's also in this first canto. Prabhupada would also quote this verse a lot. And sometimes people think, well, if I engage in devotional service and I give up my material life, what will I gain? But here this verse explains here that this is from the first canto, 5th chapter, verse 17. It says, one who has forsaken his material occupation to engage in devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature state, yet there is no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duty, does not gain anything. So even if one doesn't complete devotional service in this life, and whatever activities one performs in devotional service is like money in the bank, and then one will pick up in their next life and continue on until one reaches perfection. And perfection means to, again, return back to that nature which is intrinsic to our actual identity, the spiritual world. So we're in a foreign place, the material world. And that's why people are struggling all the time, because they're trying to find something that is real in a place that is unreal. It's like, there's an example. This is material, right? This is a nice example. One man, he's looking on the ground, he's looking. And his friend comes along and says, what are you looking for? He said, oh, I lost some money. I'm trying to find it. Can I help you? Yeah. So he comes along and they're both looking. And his friend says, after some time, are you sure you lost it here? He says, no, I lost it over there, but there's more light here. Material life. It appears to be, you can see it, there it is, go for it. But you can't find anything because it's just the glitter that comes by way of Maya's show to attract the living entity. But ultimately, what's hidden or gupta, what we can't see, is our actual spiritual nature, which is intrinsic to our existence and the foundation for all success in life. But the more we engage in devotional service, especially hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord, the more we find satisfaction in all areas of life. And Krishna consciousness is not limited to simply performing spiritual activities. It satisfies all activities for all aspects of life. One can find satisfaction and perfection in all areas of life through Krishna consciousness. Here it's mentioned that there are two aspects to the living entity's existence. One is called extended, and one is called personal. Sometimes we say, Mamaya, what is it? Aham mameti, janasya aham mameti. There is the I conception and the mind conception. The I conception is stronger, and that's mostly applies to the living being. I am, put another word after it. American, Jewish, woman, man. In other words, any type of identity that one has in relationship to the type of body or the place that they exist in is called a conception of illusion based on a false sense of identity. And that's the I conception. The mind conception is, this is mine. This is my house. This is my, my car, mine, the possessions we have. Or even, this is my wife. This is my children. The mind. So I conception is stronger. It's more stronger as far as the form of identity. And the mind conception is a little less. And it's explained that animals are more connected to the mind conception They don't have so much awareness that they are a dog is not aware that I'm a dog. Although he acts like a dog, he's not thinking that, yeah, I'm a dog. But he is a dog. And he's got his bone, he's got his little dog house. That's his main, focus. Or, his puppies, like that. So the mind conception is more awareness within the lower species of life, and the I conceptions. But both of them are misconceptions. The real conception is Jiva Sarupa Krishna and Nityadasa. But the living entity is eternally part and parcel of Krishna. Devotees were preaching in one time. This kind of illustrates how strong the bodily conception of life is. Devotees were preaching in one place. I think it was in South America. And so they were speaking to this one very prestigious, kind of well-to-do and very intelligent people. There was a man and a wife. They were together. So the devotee was telling him, you're a spirit soul. And so the lady said, yes, I know I'm a spirit soul. I'm a female spirit soul. And he's a male spirit soul. So the bodily conception of life can become so strong that one identifies the external material identities with the soul. The soul is completely aloof from all of these things, this pure spiritual energy. And here Prabhupada says, the soul wants to get out of the encumbrances of the limitations that are placed upon it by material life. It just wants to be free. It wants to express its freedom by breaking through all of the restrictions. And people try to do that in a material way. They find themselves restricted by life itself, and so they try to do something different, or try to be different. But all they're doing is changing suits on the Titanic. So, just like on the Titanic, the boat is there, and the people on the top and the people on the bottom, when that Titanic hit the iceberg, people on the bottom knew about it. But the people on the top deck, they were still partying and didn't know what was happening. And then, of course, in due course of time, everyone got the understanding they were in trouble. But it's like that. It's just people sometimes think that by just changing my material situation, I can find some better happiness. But there's another verse here that explains that, which is just the following of that verse we just read. It says that persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should not endeavor only for that purposeful end which is not attainable, even by wandering to the highest planet Brahmaloka down to the lowest Patakaloka. In other words, wherever you go in the material worlds, there's always birth, death, disease, and old age. Everything is temporary. That's what that is saying. So don't try for any position. And then the second part of the verse is interesting. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be attained automatically in due course of time. Just in due course of time, we obtain miseries even though we do not desire them. But people don't know that. They think if I could just adjust my life, then I can avoid the miseries and I can find happiness. And sometimes it appears that happens. But what happens is the person changes the type of suffering that they are due to get, but they still get the same amount. It's just like, here we are in Florida. It's nice, it's warm. People come here to get away from, the cold places in America. I'll be happier down here. It's just more warmer, and I can ride my bicycle all year round, But then what happens is, you fall off your bike and break your leg. So, or you get some other kind of calamity. In other words, material happiness and distress are allotted to the living entity, karma, daivana, trainer, the scriptures saying, according to one's birth. So one cannot increase their happiness nor decrease their misery unless they come to Krishna consciousness. Then it becomes easy. Then the due course of misery that we are meant to suffer becomes gradually lessened to a point of nothing. And then what is called real happiness or spiritual happiness grows more and more and more. Like that. But people can't understand that, and so they just struggle to increase happiness and decrease misery. But in Krishna consciousness, just like Prabhupada said in Krishna consciousness, he said, you joined the Krishna conscious movement, you may have been a murderer in your last life, and therefore you have to pay for that murder by giving up your life. But now you've become a devotee, so you cut your finger. So in other words, Krishna consciousness minimizes, devotional service minimizes the reactions of our past suffering that we're due to achieve based on our activities. And so that's, of course, that's not the reason you become Krishna conscious, but that is a side benefit. The real benefit is that one can actually connect with themselves and what ultimately with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in loving devotional service. So this verse that we read as the beginning is actually quite a sweeping verse. Just sweeps everything. That ultimately all material activities are useless because they cannot give any benefit to the living entity who is different from the material body. And all spiritual activities, even if it's done in a small amount, has what we say eternal benefit. It simply says, just like it says, if people just take prasadam once in their life, they're guaranteed a human body. If they take Krishna prasadam just once. That's the power of anything connected to the spiritual activities. Okay. Questions? Comments? Yes? Hare Krishna.
We were talking about how the soul is kind of dormant when we're not spiritual, it's just riding along with goodness. And then we do plug into the activity that the soul is drawn to when we're alive.
Yeah, it starts to experience its nature. Yeah.
So I was wondering, when we're in the association with devotees or those who are practicing, are we getting the glimpses of their real belief? When we become attached to their devotees, are we becoming attached to their souls that would see that? Like, is that becoming more apparent, or are we still being attracted to their personality?
It may be a combination of both. Unless, if we're pure, in other words, if we reach self-realization, then ultimately that relationship is all based on the principle of that we are spirit, soul, and we're attracted in that way. But, it's just natural to get attracted to persons because they have a certain personality. But it may be a mixture of both. But if you get attracted to a devotee, it doesn't matter. That's good. And that what is the principle of attraction is the mood of service. The mood of service is the principle by which attraction turns into relationships. And then we develop a relationship based on service, because service is our nature. Everyone in the material world is serving, but they're serving in a motivated way in order to get some remuneration for their activity. And therefore people are not always satisfied by doing service in the material world, neither with the benefit that they receive from that service. But a devotee is happy simply to serve, because it's our nature to serve. And if you make someone happy by your service, then that's your source of happiness also. Yes.
Thank you very much for class.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I really liked when you talked about the difference between the I conception and the mind conception, and how you were saying that the mind conception is more kind of in the animals, right, with the dog.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, and that also kind of reminded me of like children, right? Like human children, they don't. I mean, they might say, you know, I am this. They don't really understand it, but they definitely have a sense of mine. You know, that toy is mine.
Right.
You know, someone else takes the toy or takes the juice box or whatever, they cry, right? They have that strong sense. But then as they get older and like your more, you know, human cognitive abilities come online, then the I becomes more important. So I feel like that stronger sense of I is kind of like a hazard, I guess, of just higher cognitive powers that humans have. This more advanced, subtle material body.
Yeah, it's more binding in material sense also.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can somehow or other see the difference between the mind conception. You have something, you don't have something. Well, I don't have it anymore, it's not mine. But when it comes to the I conception, you don't lose that simply. You can only lose that through understanding your real identity gradually. Yeah, that's why it's stronger. Thank you. Well, yes, Prabhupada Priya.
About the difference between the soul being sleep, like kind of being inactive, although like feeling more active, and the soul being active. So I'm wondering, because it's not always black and white, it's not always everything's either completely engaged in material activities, etc., or
Right.
And we're doing something that's kind of like a material activity, but we're trying to feel it or get the results of it. Or else we're doing maybe a spiritual activity like process of service, but it's mixed with spiritual patience. So then, how does that affect the extent to which the soul is actually active?
Well, in the spiritual sense or material sense? The material sense is just being dragged by the mind, the intelligence, and the senses. Just like that example we used for the chariot. Yeah, it's more like being pulled into that because we think, the person in the material consciousness thinks, I am this body and I am this mind. So the soul is just following along, that's all. But the soul also has a body, mind, intelligence like that, but it's covered by the material body, mind, and senses, that's all. So when we perform devotional activities, we start cutting through the coverings, and then our spiritual senses, spiritual mind, or spiritual intelligence starts to become active or more prominent.
Is it that as soon as the soul starts to be active, it stays active, or does it kind of like?
It's always active.
When we do material activities, it just like shut down.
It's always active, but it's being dragged in the material sense because spirit doesn't touch matter. It's just there. Just like you're inside of your car, and if you get so attached to your car, you might think, I'm my car, You're not, you're in the car, we're in the body. So, and as the body and mind and senses act on a material sense, the soul is just being pulled along with it.
Someone who's spiritually awake, it's the other way around. The soul is acting and driving the body and mind along.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, I think there's a statement that says, you want to be happy materially, forget about death. If you want to be happy spiritually or progressive in your spiritual life, always remember that death can happen at any time. That awareness makes one more active on the spiritual level. So yeah, even material things can be transformed or used awaken the soul also. And it's getting when we connect it to the principles of devotional activity. Is that clear? That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
This sensation, we are engaged sometimes in engaging of Krishna units according to Krishna, and they do not go attraction to the Buddha. So they get like regular jobs outside. So how do we have motivation
to make that happen?
to continue that job? Yeah,
how to connect our material activities to our spiritual life? Well, it's a little bit complicated, but we try to explain it that because my main, you should be thinking, my main activity in life is to become Krishna conscious. Therefore, I may have to do these material activities in order to maintain the body. But they're not the activities I perform for my happiness, they're just necessary. So we have to do that in order to maintain the body. So if a person has a family, they may have to provide for that family by taking some material employment. Now, of course, that's not ideal, but that's the way the situation is, at least. Our taking care of family members and also doing family responsibility. But because I'm a devotee, I'm doing everything as a service to Krishna. And this parallel activity, which is not bhakti generally, is called gona bhakti. Gona bhakti means parallel to the activities of pure bhakti. They're required, but ultimately they're not necessary in the ultimate sense. And when one reaches higher stages of Krishna consciousness, then one will simply perform only spiritual activity. But if we see our material activities as activities that we can also offer to Krishna in a way that helps us to perform, helps us to connect with devotional service. In other words, okay, we have karma yoga. So you work, you make some money, and so you give some of that money to propagate religious principles. And so that detaches one a little bit from the results of one's activity. And that detachment can lead ultimately to knowledge, higher knowledge, principles. So it's a science of learning how to connect the material activities with your spiritual practice in the sense that they support rather than take away from our Krishna consciousness. So there's certain activities in the material world will definitely take away from our practice of spiritual life, and others may support it. But then it's mostly about the consciousness. Even the supportive activities, if they're not done in a conscious way, can make us think, well, yeah, I'll try to be happy in this way, simply by getting a lot of money, a nice house, or a nice material arrangement like that. But the devotee doesn't concern themselves with that. It's just a necessary part of the living in this material world, at least for a certain period of time anyway. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's consciousness that's the dividing factor or the determining factor. Okay, anything else? Yes.
I just said, suppose if you live in a material world, you have certain obligations.
Yeah.
So if you don't do it, it's like spiritual things do that selfish. Because you got something that is also.
Yeah, we do have certain obligations, but then how much obligations do we want to accept? And that's also, we can determine based on our material situation. So that's a requirement. Prabhupada said, don't neglect taking care of your family members because you are a devotee. You might have to provide something for them. So, but the ultimate principle is that ultimately everything material is ultimately, if it's used for bringing us closer to Krishna, Krishna consciousness, or solidifying or foundationing our material life in such a way that we can practice Krishna consciousness easily. And sometimes if our material life is up in the air, we're so too much diverted away from our spiritual practice. Our minds are more concerned about solving the material and not having enough time for Krishna consciousness. That's why we have places like Krishna House, so you can concentrate your spiritual life and not have to worry so much about material responsibilities. And that's an advantage in practicing Krishna consciousness. But those who have outside responsibilities, do them, but don't waste time. Just get them done. Was that clear enough? Yeah. So yeah, we're not neglectful, but at the same time, we're not seeing these things as the source of our happiness, nor the goal of life either. They're just necessary. Using an example. I mean, Hare Krishna. You know, you have to pass stool and urine, but you don't look, think that, wow, this is the best part of my day, You just got to do it, That's just part of life. It's necessary. So there are many material things that are just apparently, according to my particular phase in life, are required at that stage.
I was just thinking that Prabhupada gives an example that your house makes a bowl of that. It's kind of like, everything is here, like there's plenty of whatever
Yeah,
you need in the world.
we don't have to start our own hole.
Yeah, it's like, pretty easy.
Yeah, it's quite easy. And God automatically provides for that with a little effort in that direction. So that's a good point. And that's the principle, is try to simplify your material life in such a way as you don't, become too much diverted away from your spiritual life just to take care of material responsibilities. And if you engage in devotional service, Krishna will take care of you. That's automatic. He will provide everything you need automatically. Shouldn't think, well, if I'm a devotee, I'm neglecting parts of. No, Krishna will take care of everything you need. And then, of course, there may be some things we want, but we don't really need. So we have to be careful and understand what is actually necessary. And sometimes Krishna also will give you things you want, although you don't need them, just to show his affection for you. Sometimes he does that. Not all the times. But he will always give you what you need, all the time, that's for sure. If you have that faith and you work in devotional service, he will take care. He takes care of his devotees. Like ladies come to me and say, I have to find a husband. I say, well, just, all right, make your effort in that area, but stay engaged in devotional service. When Krishna is pleased, he'll send you a husband, don't worry. And that's a fact, and I've seen it happen so many times.
You don't need to read the newspaper or worry about this. Everyone else in the world is reading the news. And then something important about So in the same way, it's like when it comes to earning money in one sense, everybody in the world is out there earning money. That means
Yeah, you always get it. You want to hear some stories in that regard? And these are. This is a few of them. There was the devotees in the Philadelphia temple. it was time for the rent to be paid. It was $250, and there was no money. Devotees were using all the money just to maintain. So the temple president said, let's all go out on Sankirtan. So that was the day before the rent was due. So they all went out on Sankirtan. They did Harinam Sankirtan. And while they were chanting, one very nicely dressed gentleman comes up, and he hands one of the ladies, he said, this, I want to give this to you, as an envelope. She said, thank you. The man disappeared. Nobody saw him again. And then when they opened it up, it was $250, just enough for the rent. Malati tells the story when they were in 1968, I think they were in San Francisco. Again, no money for the rent. They had used all the money just to live. The rent was due the next day. They're walking down the street. It was a deserted street. Nobody, hardly anyone was there. All of a sudden, they see $100 bills flying in the air. The wind was blowing money in the air. They just start picking it up. Yeah? You can ask Malati, she'll tell you that story. And they had more. So if you stay engaged in devotional service, Krishna will always provide this. He's always provides for his devotees. Sometimes in a miraculous way, but most of the time he provides accordingly, just when it's needed. So it takes a little faith, but that faith is strengthened by when we associate with devotees and gain devotional service, we see. For a little observer, we can see how Krishna is arranging everything for what we need. Yeah, it's not that Krishna always fulfills what you want, because sometimes what you want may not be what is beneficial for your spiritual life. So you may not get that. But sometimes he does give you that too, but only once. just to let you know you don't need it. Krishna is very kind. He makes his devotee his most important part of his activities. He always takes care of his devotees. His devotees are more important to him, according to Krishna. He sees his devotees more important than himself. So anyone who becomes a devotee, it's a very, very special position to get. You get taken care of by the Supreme Lord. It's very special. It's not a small thing. Anything else? Yeah. Well, I think the two questions are the same answer. Was Prabhupada that made me surrender? It was Prabhupada that was here. There was many. Prabhupada has many, what we say, very laudable and very attractive qualities. But one quality that attracted me more than anything was his surety. When he spoke, he didn't speak, well, maybe, perhaps, it's like this. No, he said, this is it. This is it. And he said it with such conviction that it just attracted me. And then, of course, when I started to practice, and then there was no doubt. But that attracted me a lot. He was never like, a perhaps person. This is the way it is. Krishna's God, and you're his servant. Hare Krishna. So, but for some, that was a little hard to digest in the beginning. But those who stayed understood that yes, in the due course of time, they understood, yes, this is a fact. what Prabhupada said was his realizations in Krishna consciousness, and not just some way of tracking people. That makes sense? Okay, thank you. Hare Krishna. It's very nice to see all of you here. I came across, I was in New Vrindavan for the Arts Festival in May. This was my first real exposure to the whole principle of Krishna House. And I thought this is the most wonderful thing that has developed in our society. Yeah. So yeah, it's a very wonderful opportunity to associate with devotees and practice Krishna consciousness and make life simple. Making life simple is not a simple thing. It's very difficult. And people out there are struggling just to live, just to get food, just to find some relationship. Everything is so hard. Even the ordinary human requirements become such a burden for people. But in Krishna consciousness, it's so nice. You have friends, you have family, you have activities, you got really good food. People used to say to us, what do you guys put in that food to make it some kind of, LSD or something? No, we say it's when we offer it to God, it becomes spiritual. That's what makes it so good. And people would come to our temples and they would say, can I have that recipe for that? And they would take it, we give them the recipe, they take it home. And they say, when I make it, it doesn't taste like when I have it here. It's not as good. I said, well, the ingredient in Krishna is missing, that's why. That's the ultimate principle of prasadam, it's offered to Krishna. Okay, thank you. So you have other activities to perform? I guess the next thing is prasadam, right? Okay. Oh. What does break mean?
Because our main service is distributing prasadam at university. So the university is.
Oh, okay. It's busy. Good. Yeah. I came at the right time. Okay, so you don't have to worry about distributing. Now you get it distributed to you. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada ki jai.